Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Facebook Live. And I also want to welcome our YouTube viewers as well. My name is Kathy Fromme. I'm an SVP educator. Today, we are on our Husqvarna Viking channels, both on Facebook and YouTube. Welcome, everyone. Today's topic is all about using the quilt binder, but I'm going to give you ideas to use this wonderful tool. By the way, if you don't have one yet, you might want to check in with your dealer or local retailer to see about picking one up for a Christmas gift for yourself. It's okay for us to shop for ourselves. We deserve it. So this is a wonderful attachment that can do way more than bind quilts. One of my favorite cooking shows in the past was Alton Brown, and he always was very educational about all of the cooking tools that he used. He hated unitaskers. He hated tools that you could only use for one thing in the kitchen because they take up a lot of room. Well, I try to apply that philosophy to many of our accessory feet and our notions and things that go along with our machines. I always want to stretch myself and figure out what else could I do with this particular foot or attachment. So that's where my premise comes from, more uses for the quilt binder. So everyone make sure that you use our chat. Amy in the background, thank you, Amy, for running the show today. She will monitor the chat and let me know when we have some questions. So we'll break periodically for questions. I love it that you're putting in, welcome and hello from North Carolina and Kalamazoo and all over the place, Ontario, fabulous. So love to see all of that. So let's get started. So first off, we do have two different quilt binder attachments. Our original quilt binder attachment is this box. And this, we now sort of call it our 1/2 inch quilt binder because that is the end result of the size of the binding. The actual packaging, though, just says quilt binder on it. Okay. And then we added, get this in the light so you can see it properly. There you go. And this one says right here, 5/8 inch quilt binder. Now, besides the 1/8 of an inch difference in width of the finished product, there is a difference between the binders. So our 5/8 inch quilt binder creates an easy to apply double folded 5/8 inch binding to finished garments, home decor, and quilt projects. And I'm going to hold this picture up. I'll show it to you with like real fabric too, but I want you to see, just because this illustration is excellent, that you start with a different sized fabric for your binding, and we'll go over what we do for each one. But this ends up with a double fold. So that means there's two pieces of fabric on the outside edge of whatever it is you're binding, whether that's a quilt or a garment. So this edge here is 2 layers of fabric in the 5/8 inch binder. In the original binder, it's not. It's just 1 layer, and this box does not have that type of same illustration. This is just one layer on the edge. So many quilters feel that this is a better option because it's a little more durable. All right. So we have 2 options. Which should you buy? Well, that's really a personal preference. You know what? Ask for one for Christmas or whatever holiday you celebrate, and ask for another for your birthday or Valentine's Day. That's not too far away. So anyway, having both in your arsenal is not necessarily a bad thing. Okay. I'm going to switch cameras on you. And so just give me a moment to do that. And I'm going to come over here to my machine. I do have one of the binders already attached, but I want to show you what all is involved with the quilt binder. Now, we have done, come back to me. There we go. We have done several different quilt binder Facebook Lives already. And on those, you've seen like how to attach it to the machine and how to insert your fabric, how to turn corners. I'm not going to be showing you that kind of thing today, but I do want to go over the parts in the box. All right. So, oops, you know what? Hold on, guys. I know why I can't see myself properly. There we go. I just had to fix that. So this plate back here is the plate that attaches to the machine. And at the bottom, you see these two screws, and that actually holds the binder itself. Okay, so it looks like a little funnel. I'm holding up the 1/2 inch quilt binder right now. So when I turn it to the side, you can see these little prongs. And this is what folds over both raw edges of your binding. Now, the 5/8 inch binder is a little bit different. It doesn't have the bottom prong, and I have that already on the machine, but I will show it to you at some point. Amy, please remind me if I don't take it off to show them how that doesn't have the same exact point at the bottom for turning, because the bottom layer will stay flat. It'll make more sense when I actually show you, okay? Now, at the back end, you have the little fence, I call it, the little guide that you can put your binding into while you're sewing and hold it in place. And here's the channel at which you place your fabric, okay? All righty, so we are going to take a closer look at the machine. And I'm going to share with you a couple of my tips because I'm big on that. All right, come out a little bit for you. When you create your binding, each binder comes with instructions as to how to use it, how to set it up, what are all the pieces, parts, what size to cut, all that good stuff. But they take two different sizes of fabric strips. So the 1/2 inch quilt binder, you cut your fabric strips 1 3/4 inch wide, and you leave them single layer. So we just have single layer. Okay. For the 5/8 inch quilt binder, we cut our strips 3 inches wide. Okay, so here's 3 inches wide. And you can see that I pressed this in half, and I have a nice sharp crease in it because we operate the two binders just a little bit differently as far as feeding fabric in. So this piece is 3 inches wide, and it's prepared for our 5-inch binder, which is the one I have on my machine. Now, regardless of which size binding you're doing, do yourself a favor and don't end up with a mass of binding all over the place. Save, if you have an embroidery machine, your embroidery stabilizers are on nice sturdy cardboard rolls for the most part. Most styles come that way. And then you can sneak over to the workshop, and like I just used a little hand saw I found, and I just cut that in place. You could also maybe get a roll from like aluminum foil or plastic wrap from your kitchen when it's empty. Save those and cut them into lengths. So here I have about 10 yards of this binding I have for a future project, all rolled nice and neat. The best thing is I've already ironed this twice since I started my project. I'm like, I'm not doing it anymore. I got to roll this one up. So, sometimes you think you're going to get a project going, and you get waylaid. So sometimes, it causes more work for you when you just kind of push things aside. So store your bindings very neatly on little cardboard rolls or anything else. But this is a great way to upcycle that. That's something that you would put into your recycling bin anyway. So you might as well upcycle it for your sewing room. Okay. How are we doing, Amy?
You have a couple of questions, although I think you're probably going to go over them a little bit later. So somebody asks the single layer, so the 1/2 inch binder, they want to know or make sure that there are no raw edges that will be seen on that.
That's true. There are no raw edges that will be seen with that binder. So it's just the number of layers that's on the outside edge. It's either a single, which is 1/2 inch, or double, which is 5/8 inch. Okay. All right. So If you think we should hold the other questions, that would be fine with me.
I think most of them you've already answered. So I think you're good to go.
All right, fabulous. So we're going to talk about this 5/8 inch binder. We're going to start with it first. And I already have it attached to the machine. If you've seen any of our prior videos on the quilt binder attachment, you may remember that the position of this tool can be positioned left and right with these two screws in front. Okay, so they both loosen, and this whole mechanism slides left or right. So that's one of the ways to adjust the binder in relationship to your foot and your needle. If you need to adjust your needle position, you can do that as well. I usually do a combination of both things. So whatever works best for you in your situation. I also know people that will take a Sharpie marker and they'll draw a little shape right against that washer. You need to use that washer under this thumb screw. And that way they know where they like to have it set all the time. I didn't really feel like drawing on mine, so I haven't done that yet. I'm going to take my 3-inch fabric. I've already folded it in half and pressed it. This is what's very important when you load your fabric. And I'm going to just cut a little point. So cutting from the open end. So I have a little point that's going to make it a little bit easier. You can do a point like this, or I could also fold it and cut a point. So I have more of an arrow, but I find that this usually works just as well. And we're going to feed this through the binder. I'm just checking to see how good we can see things. Okay. All right. The most important thing when feeding this in is that the fold has to be at the bottom. The open, the two raw edges are at the top when this feeds through. So I'm going to start by placing my fabric strip into my binder. And I'm using, my stiletto works perfect for this to just kind of push that through. Just going to get it started, and then I'm going to wrap my fabric strip just around that fence. Now, I have a small length of strip, but if I had my large roller strip, I would set it on here. I have one of those thread stands from many years ago for serger threads, like an auxiliary stand, and I could put it on there. I could also use the auxiliary pin on my, I'm using the Epic Quilt 97, by the way, our newest sewing machine, and it has 2 spool pins. With 10 yards of binding, I could afford to put that up top and it would be out of my way. But I don't need to do that for now. So we're going to focus on, and I'm going to zoom you in. Hopefully not too far. There you go. Amy, is that camera angle okay for them?
I think maybe you can bump it just up a little bit. We're seeing a lot of the bottom of the machine.
Got it. Whoops.
Too far.
I think it needs a little oil on my
that looks good right there.
My tripod needs a little oil on that. Also, before we get started, I wanted to make note, because I am using the Epic Quilt 97, I have on my machine a foot that comes with the quilt binder attachment, at least with the 5/8 one. It does come with the feet, and it has a foot called a quilt binder foot that works with the integrated dual feet. So that's like having a walking foot in place. If you're sewing on a Ruby 90 or a designer diamond or one of our original rubies, even an opal, all of those machines take both quilt binder attachments. You do have to make sure that you have a plate that has the proper holes in the side to receive the base plate back here. But your dealer or your retailer can get that plate for you, and then you're good to go. If you don't have an IDF machine, you can certainly use a walking foot with it. And there is actually one of the interchangeable dual feed plates, one of the extra feet that fits that machine, that walking foot, for using a quilt binder. It has a special guide on it, is what it has. Can you do it without? Well, sure, you can. However, these tools are designed to make our sewing easier, faster, and better. So I try to use, the proper tools whenever I can. So I'm just going to re-engage, easy to re-engage, bring that integrated dual feed down. It just nests right inside the back of the foot there. And then I'm going to continue to pull this fabric through. Now I know my arm will be here away in a minute, so just hang tight. I'm just pinching this fabric and I'm doing a hard turn to the right. Okay, when I get that fabric away. Here you can see I have one of those little nodules, and that is what's rotating my fabric strip as it feeds through. It's folding it, but I don't have one at the bottom. Unlike, I don't know if I can get this in the picture without, there we go. You can kind of see it on here that you have two of those little prongs. There's only one on the 5/8 inch binder. So when I pull this out, I'm going to go ahead and pull out quite a bit for you. And I think I'll lower my presser foot just to hold things in place and swing this around for you. The binding only folds the top. That's your raw edges. So there will be no raw edges when you sew this. Okay. All right. So that's how that works. I'm going to bring this back and get it in position. You can just kind of thread it back and forth. And the quilt binder attachment foot, use my stiletto to get that little thread. It's furnace time, at least in Northeast Ohio. And so now we have static in our homes. At least I do. There we go. And my thread is kind of staticky. Even though it's cotton thread, it's kind of staticky. You can pull that back and forth through so that you get that into position. Okay. All righty. So I am going to switch you back here to this camera. And I was in my settings adjusting my lighting for today. I want to show you that in my fabric selection, I have woven fabric selected and medium weight fabric selected. And if I were to choose the seam function, it would choose a straight stitch just like it has now. I can go back to my Joy of Sewing Advisor and start all over again, clear my ongoing work and all of that, but I don't think I want to at this point. Now, I played with my settings earlier for this particular setup. And so I have a little cheat sheet down here. The stitch I'm using is stitch from menu A1, stitch number 2, which is the straight stitch, everyday straight stitch. I want to increase my stitch length a little bit to 3.5 is what I really like for my purpose today. But if we come back and look at the needle, and I can zoom, I'm kind of at a side angle, so you're not really seeing it. My needle is in the center position of the foot. So that's going to sew like in the middle of the binding. I don't want that. I want my needle to be more to the left. So on my screen here at the bottom, and I don't want to use my hard stiletto on it. I have a nice rubber tip stiletto. I'm going to touch my positioning. And I discovered earlier for this fabric and what I want to do, I like position -2.3. Okay. So that has moved my needle over. I can always test it by using my needle down button on my machine, and that will sink my needle in, and I can see, do I like that or not? And I think I do. So let's go ahead and sew. Now, when I stopped sewing, I did engage that needle down, so it will stop for me. Something important to note is make sure that your fabric, and I know you can't see it because I'm zoomed in too much. Make sure that this fabric tail, your binding, is not going to twist. I'm going to twist it to show you what I mean. So, if it's hanging down, it might do something awful like this and make a little twist. if you let that twist go in through all the way to the binder where it's folding in the edge, you're going to have to stop and do some ripping out with your seam ripper. It's not fun. I've done it. So don't do what I did. Try really hard to keep an eye on what's going on over here. Now, the other thing to think about is I'm just simply sewing a binding strip because I have a lot of uses for this binding strip. I do want to point out that this spot right in here, that funnel, that's where your fold is happening. So my raw edges of my binding strip are here, and the folded edge is right here. So let me just finish sewing this real quick. Okay, there we go. I'll just raise my foot up. Okay. So we have just very quickly sewn, and this piece was a full width of fabric strip, 45 inches wide, long. So, you know, it's a long strip. It sews really, really quickly. Now, I have some uses for this strip, but before I show you some of the ways I use this, I want to take you back through the quilt binder and show you how I like to finish the other edge, because we have, I don't know how well the camera picks up. So we have stitching on one edge. It's holding closed our raw edge and our fold up here. But I'm going to use this as a strap, and I really want a top stitch on both sides. I want it to be balanced. I'm kind of odd like that. Either has to be deliberately asymmetrical and look good, or it has to be balanced. So in this case, it needs to be balanced. I'm going to use this is a seam guide that we sell. It's a little magnetic seam guide. It has a little handle on it so you can grip it. And I'm going to set it right on my quilt binder, which of course is metal. Let me give you a closer look up here in a minute. There you go. And I will refeed my fabric strip that I've already sewn and closed back through my quilt binder, but not through the funnel at all. I am just using, make sure that you can see this here. I'm just using the quilt binder itself. So I'm simply putting this through. I'm going to lower my foot so I can talk to you. I'm keeping the strip that I have sewn up close to the edge because I need a guide, right? I need a guide to sew with. And I'm going to sink my needle down in there. And then I'm going to take this little magnet and I'm going to push it up, and it's going to help keep this strip in place. I'm going to see if I can come a little better to you. There we go. And I may want to change my needle position for this step. I'm going to take it out a little bit more so it's more balanced. I think, let's see, I used 3.0 in my test earlier, so we'll do that. And then I'm just, again, I'm watching right here to keep my strip in place so everything is even. I don't have to worry about like stitching perfectly on the edge as long as I keep my strip going exactly in the same spot. Alrighty, wasn't that fun? So now, perhaps if I loop that, I don't know how well that shows up for you. Sorry, guys. You know, it's all the left is right and the right is left on video. There you go. All right, Amy, I'm going to show some samples of how I use this, but we might have some questions at this point.
I'm trying to dig through here. I think I've answered some of the questions that I saw that were easy to answer.
Okay.
So here's a question that actually, you might know. Somebody wants to know about that magnetic seam guide.
Yeah.
Do you think it can be used on the Designer one?
Well, I have it. It's actually positioned on the quilt binder itself, not on the plate, not on the stitch plate, because I'm using it differently than it was intended for. You know, if you were just sewing a seam, you would want it on the stitch plate, and the Designer one has a pretty small metal stitch plate. That would be my hesitation for using it for everyday sewing. But in conjunction with the quilt binder, the magnet is actually on the quilt binder attachment itself. So
perfect. Okay. Yep. I think that's all I've seen that I couldn't answer. So
okay. So I'm going to show you a couple samples here. This is a little draw bag, a little cute drawstring bag, has some of our wonderful decorative stitches and some of our applique at the other side. And it also has like a little carry strap, you know, so you can carry this in your hands. And to make little narrow straps, you know, it's really hard. I know that doesn't focus well. It's really, really hard to, you know, turn strips inside out. And I've got every gadget there is, and they do work. But you just saw me sew 40 inches of fabric, you know, in probably, I didn't even time it, maybe 30 seconds or so. And you can make a whole lot of straps in 30 seconds. So here's now this was done with the 1/2 inch binder, so it's a tad narrower. And then I have another bag here. This bag is a backpack bag. It's a Serger project. And instead of getting like round cord to do this, again, this is another drawstring bag. But just had to make a few more strips of this. Makes a great fabric strap, okay, without any difficulty at all. Really great use of the quilt binder attachment. Fast, and very easy. Okay, now I'm going to switch you. Okay, Amy, let's see here. Switch cameras on us. And I'm going to take you over here. Now we were working on this earlier, and I know there'll be some shadows, guys. I'm sorry, but I don't, we do see some shadows. You see my arms. I could can make little puppets. Now, when I was making straps, I immediately went to my youth when I made those pot holders. Remember that pot holder loom of our youth where we had those stretchy bands and you could weave? Well, I'm like, okay, I can make lots of straps and weave lots of things. So I have some things to show you here. I stitched a lot of these 5/8 inch strips. And I just made this little sample here for you. It's just 6, so I made my strips about 6 or 7 inches long. I pinned this. This is just a piece of foam core from like an office supply store. Or if you have like a pin board pressing mat that is pinnable, that would work too. I put a piece of stabilizer on my board and drew a line. That's what the red line represents. That's going to be my baseline. And I put a pin in each strip at the top above my baseline. And I started the first strip for you because this is going to be a little challenging to do on camera, but I will try for you. So I'm going to move this up into place and put it at my red line. Because there's just no way to do this except through. There we go. And how about if I pin from this side where it's closer to me? And of course, I must have the dullest pin in my pin cushion. There we go. So you can see that I just rolled under, over, under, over, under. And then I take a second strip. And of course, you can just get it started I may not even need any pins. And do the reverse. And then snug that next strip up. I always, when I'm weaving a piece for a project, I always, allow lots of extra. It's just easier to have extra than try to be, running short. So I'm sure that many of you have seen something like that in the past where you can weave strips together, right? So I have a placemat project here, and this is the middle of the placemat or small table runner, and the top and bottom are finished with binding already, so that's already bound. And the ends are going to get a piece of woven matching fabric. So the same fabric I used in my applique is going to be the end piece here. So I had to make the decision about, how big that was going to be. I simply made this part first, measured that distance. And on my stabilizer, I actually drew out the size I wanted my piece to be. And I will attach that to the ends. And then on the stabilizer, I have it all, this piece is all sewn together. Here's a completely woven part. So you can see what the weaving looks like. Doesn't have to be perfect on every end, but I do have my line at the top. So I have a straight line to follow. When my weaving was done, I sewed in place all my strips, took out all my pins, and now I can just add this to my mat. And then what I will do, I press that under for you. Once it's attached, I'll trim this down and trim out my extra batting that's in here. And then I'll bind that edge on the back side. So it's going to have a clean finish on both sides. So no raw edges left at all on that. So again, taking your quilt binder attachment and making strips to weave. And I bet that those of you who have young children and are crafty can think of all kinds of fun things. We all have lots of scraps of in our sewing room. You only need, for the 1/2 inch binder, you only need strips that are 1 3/4 inch wide or 3 inches wide for the 5/8 inch binder. Imagine you could just sew strips and hand them out to your grandkids and you could have a little weaving party. Okay. You could make woven insets to go like maybe decorative in a bag. You could have that, you don't have to weave it straight. You could weave it on the diagonal. You could have lots of fun with things like that. Okay. All righty. Amy, how about some questions? Any questions?
You answered it by saying how wide the strips needed to be. So I think you were good.
Okay. All right. Fabulous. All right. I've got some other samples to show you. Let me check our time. Okay. We're great on time. And a couple other techniques that we can do. I did a stitch comparison between the 1/2 inch and the 5/8 inch binder, side by side, same fabric, same piece, same exact fabrics in both. And I mean, it is pretty hard to discern the difference of 1/8 of an inch in this kind of sample. The sample on top, the one that you're seeing with the pin, that is the 5/8 inch quilt binder. I can turn this and let my camera focus. It probably won't focus on that, but this is the one with a fold on the back side. Okay. And then the other sample is the 1/2 inch binder. Now there's a significant difference in the weight of how they feel. So that could also be a decision, that could be a factor in your decision making is if you want something that's more weighty, that gives more balance, go with the 5/8 because it does weigh more. There's twice as much fabric in it as in the 1/2 inch. Now I also wanted to show you, let me unpin these because I don't need them attached anymore. My pin where it belongs. You don't have to do a straight stitch. This is just one of our stitches that kind of goes left and right, back and forth. You don't have to do a perfect straight stitch. You can do something like this, or I love using this stitch. This is one of our applique stitches. Amy, are you getting a good view of this, or do I need to change cameras?
That looks pretty clear to me.
Okay, good. So this is like a blanket stitch. It's an applique stitch, and I set my needle position over. The beauty of our machines is that, in fact, I think I should pull this stitch up on the machine. I think we have time to show that. So let me switch cameras on you and come back to the machine camera. We went to sleep, did we? And I have my little note on, let's see, which one is that? It's on the 1/2 inch. So let me make sure you're seeing what I want you to see. There you go. Okay. So in my stitches, I chose from menu B as in bobbin. That's our crafting menu. And I used stitch number 15. That was for the first stitch. Okay, that's that stitch. The second stitch, I used, did I not write down my second one for my green? I did not. Well, we will just have to go and find that stitch. I used one of my, let's see, quilt stitches, the D menu, I believe. And, you know, we have over 800 stitches. There's a lot of them to choose from. And, no, it's going to be that probably in here. But I know it was a different menu. Well, foiled by my own note that floated out of distance. Well, let me show you something similar that will work. And that's going to be the little, this is not the exact stitch I use. However, it could work. This is a blanket stitch. Now, to use this stitch, I would have to mirror image the stitch so that the straight part goes along where the binding is. Okay, so I just mirror imaged it. And then I can change the width of the bites as well as the length of the stitch. I spread it out as far as I could go because I didn't need a lot of compact stitching. And then I can also position this. So on our machines, on many of our machines, we have the ability to use stitch positioning. And this is a sewing thing. It has nothing to do with embroidery, but it's called stitch position. And it's usually found as an alternative button of your width. So down here in the corner, which let me see if I can get you zoomed up a bit more. And then I'll move my camera down a little bit. Okay, so here is width. So I have my width at 4.5 right now. There's a toggle switch. So if I just slide that stitch, that button over, now it says positioning, and I can move. If you look at the stitch on the screen, it's actually moving where it is going to sew. There's a little tiny red plus sign at the top of the stitch right underneath the foot that's recommended, in this case, the B foot. I would probably leave my quilt binder foot on. It won't hurt anything. I want to line that straight part of the stitch up with the edge of my binding. Okay, so you can do something creative like that. You don't have to use a straight stitch, so you have options. Okay.
Hey, Kathy.
Yes.
Is there a limit, somebody wants to know, on how wide, what's the widest stitch you could safely use with the quilt binder?
Well, a lot of that, Amy, is going to have to do with what machine you're using and what foot you're using, because you can use wider stitches. I think the widest I have experimented with has been about 6 millimeters, but that was giving me the look I wanted. I still needed the edge of at least one part of the stitch to catch the edge of the binding to hold it in place. Like I've used that serpentine scallopy kind of stitch that's in the quilt menu. Used it on my other machine, so I don't, there's the number 3. But like it's let me go back to what it gets at 9 millimeters, and that's probably too wide to really do a good job. Whoops, you don't need to save that. Sorry about that. To do a good job of holding my binding in place. The critical thing is if you are using a foot that is not wide enough for the stitch, because if you have a machine that's a 9 millimeter wide machine, which are Designer Epic 2, 3, Epic 95Q, and Epic Quilt 97, those 4 machines are all a 9 millimeter wide stitch, but you can put one of your original feet on that's only 7 millimeters. If you choose a 9 millimeter wide stitch, you're going to break a needle. All right, so that would be my caution, is to watch the width of the stitch and what foot you're using. But really there's no wrong way to do it. I don't think I would try any of our Omni Motion stitches. I think you'd lose the value of the stitch. It's too big for the binding. Do you know what I mean? So I think I've gone as wide as 6. I like 4.5 to 5 on many of my stitches. So that's my personal opinion. Okay.
And somebody would like to see the back of the blanket stitch. What does that look like?
Oh, sure. Let me see. Which way did I put this through the machine? Got to think about it. Okay, I put it through the machine. Binding is on the right-hand side. So this is the top side. And then here's the back side. Are you seeing that well, Amy?
Yes, it's come into focus now.
Okay. All right, good. I'll just hold that. So back side, top side. Obviously, I matched my bobbin thread with my top thread. That would be something you want to make sure happens when you're working on a project. Either match it or make it match the fabric, that you want it to be on. Okay. Anything else at the moment?
No, other than just want to let people know that there have been quite a few videos and a couple of Facebook Lives actually binding quilts.
Right.
Binder and showing how to do the corners. So you can go into the events and look at past events to find those videos on how to do that, since that's not Kathy's focus here today.
Right. Yeah. We talked about it at the top of the hour, and you may have missed that, but it certainly bears repeating that I'm looking at alternative uses for this wonderful tool we have. And many of my coworkers have already created videos on using the quilt binder as a quilt binder and turning the corners and all of that kind of good stuff. So I'm just giving you another option for that quilt binder attachment. Okay. My next thing I want to show you actually involves my green strip of fabric here. And you'll notice that I have this sewn on a folded piece of fabric. Let me try to open that up for you. It's stuck together. There we go. So I found a folded edge piece of fabric. This is a miniature sample of a ruffle. So here's a great way to create an accent for a home decor. This is a ruffle already created, ready to go on to a project. And it is done with, this one is done with the 1/2-inch binder, because that's what I had available to me at the time. And it's already been gathered. So if I were to make a ruffle and I want to bind the edge for contrast, I would bind it flat. Don't gather this edge up yet. Now, this piece, obviously we see all my raw edges where I gathered, and I use my gathering foot, or you could use your ruffler. Either foot would work great for creating that ruffle. But I had a coworker say to me, what would stop us from binding the raw edge of the fabric and gathering the folded edge? Because I like my ruffles to be, the same on both sides. I don't like seeing the wrong side of my ruffle fabric. It's just one of those things that I prefer. And I'm like, that's a fabulous idea. So here's a sample, and then we would just take this to machine. I don't have my gathering foot handy to show you, but we can easily create that ruffle. The nice thing is when you bind the edge, it gives a lot of stability to your ruffle, and you probably don't need it as full as you might think, because that edge kind of helps to keep the gathers in place, and it really gives a nice finish on the edge. I apologize, I don't have my sample that goes with this. It's in our office right now. They're using it for some project work in the office, and I did not get it back yet, but it'll be coming back to me. So I'll post a picture of that when I have it back to this page. So that's another great use of the quilt binder, is to encase an edge to make a ruffle. All right, let's see. Can I have enough time to show you this project and how to do it? Let me just reach down here and get my sample. Okay. It should get all set up for you. All right, this next use of the quilt binder attachment is to take and add a little bit of color. This is a bag. This is a little quilted bag. It's got some decorative stitching on the side here. These are sewing stitches, so it can be done in a sewing machine. However, I did cheat because we can. Because I also have an embroidery machine, I can program my sewing stitches into my hoop, and I don't have to worry about sewing straight. The machine takes care of it for me. This, however, I designed in the software. It's just a little quilted pattern with a little satin ball at the intersections of the quilting, so that it's all quilted in the hoop. Okay. This side just has some of our fun decorative stitches using yarns and couching and different things, but the handles. That's the point of me showing you this project, is the handles. So I wanted to liven up the handles. I wanted to make them stronger. So the navy that you see is just cotton webbing. It can be nylon, it can be polyester, it can be cotton. This one happens to be cotton. And I took one of the fabrics that went along with the fabric line here and cut it into strips and put the binding on the edge of the webbing. So say that 3 times fast, Amy. All right, I'm going to switch cameras back over to the machine to show you this up close here. So just give me a second here. And we want to go here. And, oops. There we go. I'm going to bring you up close again. Sorry, I know it's like kind of sliding downward. There we go. See if we can make that work for you. All righty. Amy, is that picture clear now? Did it come back in focus?
Yes, that looks good.
All right, fabulous. So I'm going to quickly change out my quilt binder attachments here. I have the 5/8 inch on. It's coming off. And I have my 1/2 inch set up already. And you can see that I already have this base plate on it. You can't store it like this if you're going to put it back in the original box. I have a plastic storage box I keep it in. But if you keep it attached, then you already have this part set up. So you don't have to reposition. And I'm just going to put that pin in place. And there we go. Find that. Put my thumb screw in back here.
Hey, Kathy, while you're setting that up,
yes,
do you think that you could use the binder attachment to make the strips that you use to make those jelly roll rugs?
You know, Amy, I thought about that, but often they have batting in them. Isn't that correct?
They do. Yeah.
And
Strips.
I thought about that, and I'm not sure you could feed the batting in. I
Yeah.
haven't tried it. I haven't tried it, but I did give it some thought. It did cross my mind. So if any of you have experimented with that, please let us know. And hey, by the way, if any of you have done something creative with the quilt binder that's not binding a quilt, um, you know, come back and share a picture in this live. We'd love to see your creations as well. Okay, so I have my half-inch original quilt binder attached to the machine. You can, for the most part, see it. There you go. And I'm going to feed the strip through just like I did. The feeding of the strip works the same way. And by the way, no one asked me this today, but you always place the wrong side of the fabric toward you because you want the pretty side or the outside of the fabric to end up on the outside of your binding, right? Now, that being said, I sometimes get asked the question, well, which side is the right side? Especially if you're looking at some of the batiks. Some of them are hard to tell what's the right side. My end answer to that is that you bought the fabric, you own it, you can use whichever side you want. It's your fabric. But in this case, we want our print side to show. I'm going to just pull this point through, and here I'm going to, I know my hand is in the way for you to see this, push a little bit further, but I'm going to kind of pinch my fabric and do a hard turn to the right, or turning it clockwise. I'm going to lower my presser foot just to give that a little bit of time to kind of set, and bring back the tail. And I'm just going to manually fold the top and the bottom raw edges in, because this is the single fold. It's not the double. This is the half-inch binder, just as a reminder. And then I'm going to just floss this back. Oops, I went too far, guys. It's a little eager there. So let me see if I can use my stiletto here. There we go, to get that back. I'm going to lower that foot. And because I switched stitches, I was showing you some different stitches, I need to come back and reposition that straight stitch more to the left. So let me just do that real quick.
Kathy, what size needle would you recommend when sewing the fabric onto the webbing?
I have a 90 needle in because the webbing is pretty stiff. So a 90 works well. If your webbing is extremely stiff, you could go to size 100. The other alternative would be to switch over to a denim needle, which is a little sharper of a point than a universal needle is. Okay. All right. So I'm going to bring it in even a little closer here so you can see this. All right. I think that's going to work for you. Here I have my webbing strip, and I'm going to raise my foot back up because I had it down, and I am positioning this webbing into the strip. So I'm going to come from behind. I'm going to just kind of wiggle this webbing up to the beginning of my strip. I'm not going to try to start at the very edge, just in, I don't know, what am I in, about a ½ inch, 3/8 of an inch, something like that. And again, use my needle down to make sure I'm anchored in place. Now, a couple of tricks I learned when doing this webbing. My needle's in a down position, so nothing's going to get out of position there. If I do not keep my webbing tight up against the edge of the fold here in this little C-shaped space, my webbing can kind of slip out and leave a little bit of a gap. And so my binding isn't real tight against the webbing. So what I typically do when I sew it, I'm going to start, is I'm using my left finger here. I'll try to keep it out of the way for you. And watching here, I don't care what's happening at the needle after I check my needle position. If I want to move it a little bit more, I can do it as well. I'm really keeping that up against there. Now, if you have our handy dandy little seam guide that sticks right to our quilt binder attachment plate. I can adjust that so that helps to guide and helps to keep. I don't have to work so hard, guys. It's a fabulous attachment for just, when you need an edge, but it works great for this too.
Kathy, when you're attaching it to the webbing, are you exclusively using the 1/2 inch, or have you ever used the 5/8 double fold with that?
You can use the 5/8 double fold. Yeah, it works the same. The difference is how much space of how much webbing you'll see when you're done. You'll lose a 1/4 inch, in the finished end. You won't have as much space in between. Okay, so let me come out a bit. So you'd have a little bit of a narrower space in between if you use the 5/8, but it can be done very easily. So one side's done. You simply rotate it around. I keep the same side up, and I usually know which side I started on because I have my little point where I started. I just do a 180-degree rotate around and put that back in. I don't have enough fabric to finish this one, but I'll give it a whirl here. We'll do what we can, Amy. Let me just reposition my fabric real quick. While I'm repositioning my fabric, any other questions out there?
Have you tried to do this on vinyl or maybe even leather before?
I have not found leather, as in animal leather. I have found some marine vinyl just because it was a project. Like, I just did it because that's what I had on hand. It's nice and stiff. It goes through real easy. But sure, you can do it. I would lengthen the stitch length for your vinyls. For leather goods, we would, if it's true animal leather, then you really want a leather needle, but that's going to ruin your fabric because it's going to cut little holes in it. So you'd have to figure out what needle you can use with your leather. But if you're thinking of like a garment weight leather, I don't see why it wouldn't work. So again, just feeding that second side through, and they're out of fabric. So use my selective thread cutter, and I'm just going to pull that through. And then you can see how easy it is to make those straps. So, all right, I'm going to come back to you guys. All right, and again, here's a finished bag with the straps attached, so you can see how that works. And you've got some space in between the strap. With the white on white, there we go. That's a little bit better. You've got this open space. We have, like I said, hundreds and hundreds of decorative stitches. Find a pretty thread that goes with your fabric. Maybe that's a nice contrast. I'd use like a deep purple or rose color on this fabric. I know it's pretty washed out on camera, but it's got some color to it. And put a decorative stitch down there. I would for sure bind the edges first so you know exactly how to space that. And then I would, again, if you have the projection on your machine on either the Designer Epic 3 or the Epic Quilt 97, for sure use that projection, set up your grid so that you project that stitch right down the middle of that binding. Okay. All righty. So looks like our time is just about up, and I have shown you my samples and what I have come up with to do on alternative uses for the quilt binder attachment. Does anyone have any last minute questions?
I'm not seeing any questions. Just thanks for all of the ideas.
You're most welcome. Now, our next Facebook Lives are coming up. There's one tomorrow. And Amy, I believe you told me that they're both My Sonnet software lives, correct?
Yes. Look, if you look over in our chat. I left the info there for you.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's see here. I think I'm on the other chat. There we go. Fabulous. So tomorrow, you can get more ideas with Mickey Hudson teaching how to create thread velvet. So that's a textured type of embroidery where you have threads. And then, well, I'm not going to spoil the surprise for you. I'm going to let Mickey share with you. That's tomorrow, December 11th, 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central Time. And then the following week, you know what? December is a busy month. I know this, but we record everything. So if you can't watch it live, please come back and take a little time for yourself during this busy season and watch our lives. That second live is Wednesday, December 18th. Again, same time, 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, with Sonny Grint, who is our boss. And she's going to be doing an introduction to our new My Sonnet quilting program. And that's actually like more of an app. It's for your computer or your tablet. Works on both platforms, Mac and PC. And you know what else? It's free. So tune in and see what we're doing with some My Sonnet quilting in 2 weeks' time. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great holiday season. And get out those quilt binders. If you don't have one, put that on your list for Santa to bring you, or you know what, treat yourself and buy it. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.